Hello guys, welcome to another video. So in the next few videos, what I'm going to do is kind of build uh, portions of the application to kind of give you an idea of how to connect the front end and back end. Most important to these forms. This is probably going to be spread across 7 or 8 videos to kind of keep it small and kind of self-contained. And then you probably should not move to the next video to at least have the current code in the video completed. So in this video, we're going to do registration. And then I will do login. Then I will add bcrypt to both of these. Then we will talk about sessions. And then I will do a small example of doing a file upload. I will not create the DB record, but I'll at least show you how to get the file on the server side, rename the file, and kind of put in the right spot. And then you guys can just do something similar to register to create a new post. And then uh, I will show how to refactor this into more of an MVC model, which is model view controller. So our routing files are not kind of polluted with all of our logic. And also we can reduce kind of coupling. We'll add some models and some controllers to going forward. And then a little later, I'll add another video, um, which will help you guys set up kind of a template engine. We'll use handlebars. That way we can get around this issue of just redirecting. I'm gonna speak on certain events, right? So for all the next videos, I'm just gonna redirect in certain scenarios, and then later we will remove all that and set it up so we can actually update HTML dynamically, right? Um, but ultimately, we're just going to redirect. But I'm going to do my best to code it in a way to where when we switch to the dynamic stuff, the code is already there. We just got to put it in the right spot. Okay, so registration, there isn't much I need to add. Um, in my routes, I have an empty router. I do want to talk about two little things I created to make my life easier. This also to show you that things do work. Is in my helpers folder, which is a valid express folder, which you kind of put items that are going to help you do things in this folder. So two helpers I have is one is a debug helper, which allows me to print with colors. So when I print with AirPrint or Success Print, it's actually going to print with with black text and a background red or green. So it looks nice, and you can actually see in the text editor. So this is a cleaner way of doing it. I'm just going to wrap console.log with these themes. I'm going to use the colors npm package to do this. All right. So it just makes it look a little funner and also easy to see. And then another one I have is this air class, which extends the JavaScript air. We're going to call the super uh, constructor an air so we can pass along the message. Then I'm going to add a redirect URL in the status. And then what I'm going to use this for is you're going to see that while promise chains are nice to do things, they're a little annoying and they can kind of do little hiccups where if you try to break a promise chain, you got to actually throw an error. You just can't return and get out of it. You got to throw an error. So I'm going to use this as my error I'm going to throw. That way I can throw it when I need to. And then say if I have a user that already exists, I can just throw this error with the message, with the redirect, with the status, and I can catch generic errors going forward. So I kind of added these two classes in. So if you guys want to see them, I'll leave them like this for a few seconds. This is my user error. This is my debug helpers, which is are two functions that print. It's just printer functions that wrap my console.log with a color. Okay. Actually, it doesn't wrap console.log. Console.log with colors just makes it look nice and pretty. Okay, so I added these two here. Okay, then I'm going to use them in my users JS routes file. Okay, so for right now, I'm going to do everything in the router, and then later I will refactor everything out so it's not in the router. Okay, because it gets kind of nasty having everything in the router going forward. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do first is we're going to set up the HTML. Well, actually, more importantly, I should probably install Node packages. So I'm going to install my packages. This all should work, hopefully. Then we'll do npm start. Okay. Then we'll go to my app. Whoops, which one here? No, I gotta install colors too, huh? npm install colors. Oops, I have to install that apparently. Okay, we're good to go. And now, if you notice, this already kind of did some stuff. So I'm going to be using this little app I have that I made last year to kind of do along with students in class. So for the most part, this just has the CSS done. Nothing is done in the front. I had that removed. We can talk about that later. I have a post form, which we'll talk about how to block this from unregistered users, so unregistered users can't make posts. Because the way you guys' database is set up, you can't really make a post without a user ID. So we're gonna have to figure out how to hook all those little kind of links up to make this work. Then I have a login button, which shows me my login page. And then I don't have a register button, but it's kind of hidden down here. So if you go to login and you don't have an account, you can go to register. So we're going to work on doing this form first. And I'm going to add in the placeholder text back because for some reason I deleted it. And you're also going to see that my passwords are not going to be hidden. That just makes my life easier. While you guys do this, you can leave it like that, and then you can always add it back later to make your life easier. So we'll come back to my code. We'll go to the HTML, which is in my public folder. I also did move all my files into my HTML folder. And then in my index router, I just updated everything to return public HTML. And then later, when we talk about handlebars, we have time, I will fix all this to make it look better. And we'll have dynamic HTML. Okay, so in my registration page, this is kind of what it looks like right now. Unfortunately, my formatter kind of formatted it in this way to where it's all kind of online. This is kind of a React style of doing the form, so we'll have to go through this very carefully. So one thing I need to do is on my form, I needed to make it so it can send information to the server when I submit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an action URL. My action is going to be users and register. Right, so we're going to register. We're going to call this function in my router. And right now, I actually don't have this defined. But in my app.js, I do have app.use_users. So what happens is if Express receives a route that looks like this, it gets sent to this file. And then it will match routes in this file. Right, so if I do app.register, it'll try to match a register route in here. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so we can't stop a break. So let's finish the changes we have here. So this is my action method that we're going to do for this. So we need this. We need to add the method. So this method is going to be post, right? So we're going to be sending a post to the server. Then we're going to set the encoding type to application www form URL encoded. It's kind of like a setting form in the URL, but you're not going to see it for it. And then we're going to go through and all of the usernames, we have to add certain attributes. So one, I'm going to add the placeholder text back so it looks better. Username. Now we're going to need these name attributes. Okay. Now this name attribute, basically, when we send the form to the server, this is the key in the object that we're going to use to grab the username value. So if your form attribute doesn't, or the input fields don't have this name attribute, you can't access it on the server. So for all the input fields that are required, you need to make sure, that they have the name attribute. So since we need the username, the email, and the password, we don't care about confirm password. These three attributes at least have to have name attributes. Okay. So this is the email. So we'll do placeholder email name equals email and then required. What this required thing says is that this field has to have text before it can be sent. Okay, if it doesn't have text, the form will be rejected. Then we'll do placeholder password name equals password. Right. And then this is all we have to do in the form. We'll add the name attribute to the fields we want to collect. Name, email, name, username, name, password. And then we need to add the action, which is the URL we're going to call when we send the form. The post method, or the type of method, which is post, and then the encoding of the form. This will set the header for us, okay? And then we'll go back to our app. We'll refresh this. If you notice, I try to send it, error, right? So we'll do t equals t at t, let's say 3t.com, password 1, password 1. Okay, we try to send it. I'm going to get an error because it says cannot post to register, right? So we'll need to add this route now. So I'm going to kill node for a second. What I'm going to do now is add a router that does post. So we'll do router.post. The URL will be register. I do not need to state users. Users is already stated here. So when a route comes in looking like this, you know, users register, the app is going to match the first part, which is going to go here. We're going to send our route or a request to this file, which is our users.js, and then it's going to match the remaining URL with this function. Okay, so that's kind of how this is going to work. Okay, so we'll set up a route file. This route, or sorry, not route file, route function. The next thing is going to be a request response and the next function. We'll play this a little later. But this is basically how we can send requests. And then we'll do console.log, and I'm going to dump out the request object. Okay. So we'll restart node. We'll come to our form. The beauty is I'm just going to spam refresh. It's going to send it. And if you notice, the form is this thing is not going to finish refreshing because I didn't end my request. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do request dot and how do you send data sent, so we know it's sent, right? But before I go back, you notice in here, in all this information about the request is being sent, this is actually basically the request object. So just scroll through it and play with it if you like. In here, there's a body parameter right here. This is the body from the form. You notice these are the field, the name attributes in the HTML. These are the values that type in the text box. And we're going to grab this to actually make a user. Okay. So what we're going to do now is, if you want to see the succeed print, we do succeed print data received short annotation, right? So we'll restart this. We'll run it. We'll refresh this, send it. We get internal server error because I don't have stuff here. Because apparently Redis request.send is not a function because this should be response.send. But if you see, this is my colors printing right here, so we know data has been received. So we'll restart node because I made a mistake. Clear. Restart it. Whoops, I don't want Firefox there. We'll refresh. And then we get data send. And then we see our thing here. And then notice we're waiting for another request. We notice that the request was sent on post users, or yeah, the request was to post users register. Right, so we can see all this information on the terminal. Okay, so I'm not going to dump the entire request object because you guys see that's crazy. You can just dump the request body if you like. What we'll get is we'll restart this. Come back here. And then we just have the object. So now we're going to use this object to make a new user in our database. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to extract the values out. So we'll let user name equals request.body.username. Let email equals request.body.email. Let password equals request.body.password. Okay. Now you guys are required to encrypt passwords, but don't worry about it right now. I will show you how to encrypt passwords in a few videos later. Okay. So once you grab all these values, I'm not going to do this process. You guys can do this on your own, but you should validate the information that you got. For instance, we should validate form data. You should do it on both sides because you can actually circumvent the validation to the front end. So validate form data, check username, check email, and then check password. You guys can define your own rules. Maybe usernames are only alphanumeric characters. Has to be 5 characters or bigger. Email's got to have the @ symbol and stuff like that. You could still the regular expression I have in the slides to do this. I think it's in the HTML slides. And then you can also check the password. Maybe your password has to be at least 8 characters, one special character, um, and one uppercase character, maybe one letter. So you guys can do it, but I'm not going to do that here. Let's just assume the data we get is good, which is a terrible thing to assume. Okay. So when we're registering a user, there's certain things we have to make sure of, right? So if you remember our database tables, there are certain constraints on the columns. One, usernames have to be unique, emails have to be unique, and we have to have a password. But having the password is not a big deal, so we can. So when going through this, we kind of have to chain this logic together and do it in steps. So first thing we do is make sure username doesn't exist. Make sure email doesn't exist. If we get past both of these, then we should create new user. If succeeds, if okay, redirect to login. Okay. If fails, redirect to register page. Okay. This is where we'll go. Now, one thing I want to make sure of is that I think I already changed it, which makes sure the register is registration. So this should be register because I changed it in my other apps. So we'll go back to index. This will be register. So it all matches it. Okay. So we'll redirect to register, and this one redirect to login. Okay. If you notice in my index.js, these are all my top level routings, which are all just gets that gets me to certain pages on my screen. And then in my users, these are all routes that are relative to just user stuff. Okay. And then catch any errors that we have. Okay. If user error set status and message and redirect. Okay. So you'll see what I'll do with this going forward. So this is the kind of steps we have to do. So we'll do a query to see if the username exists. If it doesn't, then we'll try to see if the email exists. If both of these don't exist, we'll make a new user and we'll redirect to login if all works. If exist fails, we'll go to catch block. If the username exists, we'll go to catch block. If emails exist, we'll go to catch block. If this fails, we'll go to catch block. Okay, so that's kind of how we're doing this. And I'm going to do this with promises. Okay, so one thing I'm going to need is I'm going to import my database. So db equals require. So we import our database configuration. /conf database. All right, so now we have an active database. At least we can access our database. So I'm going to use the db.execute function, which is called a prepared statement. It's going to be a cache statement. But the syntax is exactly the same, but instead of doing query, you do db.execute. Or maybe I should use query because I've been saying it, but it doesn't mean that. So what we'll do is we have our data here. So we'll do db.execute, and then this will be the SQL statement, and these will be the second parameter will be the value. So we're going to we'll do single quotes because double quotes can be assigned to the SQL statement. We'll select spell star from users where username equals question mark, and this question mark is a placeholder. You do not want to strict concatenate your SQL statements because you can get SQL injection and all that kind of fun stuff. So this will help prevent it. So this is our basic statement, right? And then the question mark is our placeholder. So we'll do comma, and then this has to be an array of values. At least it expects an array of values. And we'll do username, okay? And this is going to return a promise. So I'm going to add a bunch of .thens to this. So this will tell the database, give me all the rows that have this username, right? Technically, since we have unique usernames, worst case scenario, you get one row. Best case scenario, you get no rows, okay? So what we'll do is we'll do .then. We'll set up our results. Remember, this is an array. And fields, we're never going to use a field, but that's okay. Then we'll do our function, okay? In here, our SQL statement has completed. We have some results. Now, what we want to do is make sure that we actually have results. Make sure there's not like undefined or empty. And if we do, we'll do results. I don't care what's in the row, to be honest, because the only way I get a row back is if the usernames match. And since this is a function, closure saves me here, which is kind of cool. We'll see later in a second. Actually, this is not really closure, but uh, later we'll use these closures to help us wrap all this around so we can access data. But in any case, if we have run row, then results.length will be not will length. Length. So if the user already exists, length will be 1. If the user doesn't exist, length will be 0. So we can't just do results.length because 0 will be false, so we'll do this. Okay. So if there is an actual object, it's not undefined, and we have length equals to 0, we know the user doesn't exist. And then what we can do here is we can return db.execute. I'm going to cheat and be lazy. I'm going to copy this statement here, drop it into here, and I'm going to change this to email. And we'll do email. Okay. You actually probably can drop this into 2 statements and say select username and email, where username is equal to this. And you guys rely on the constraints, but I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to just do one thing after another to get this to go forward easily. Okay. Yeah, you could actually probably just slap this into one SQL statement saying, where select star from users where username equals username and email equals email, since those pairs should be unique anyways. Because you can't have 2 emails to one user name, can't have 2 usernames to one email anyway. So you could do this, but I'm not going to do this for this. We'll leave it like this so we can have practice with promises. Okay. So we're going to return a new promise, which is going to execute a query looking for emails. If this returns 1 row, we're bad. If it returns no rows, we're good. Now in the else block, this means we don't have a valid email or username because it won't exist already. We're going to have to break this promise chain. We don't have a chain yet, but later we'll have a chain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw new user error. We'll say username already exists. And then we'll do slash register, comma 200. Okay. I know it sounds we're putting 200, but the request did finish correctly, so we just have an invalid user. Okay. So this is our check for unique username. We'll do the same thing for email, right? And I can just copy and paste this down here. This is why you can slide it into one. But we'll get rid of this guy here. We'll say email already exists, and we'll redirect to register, right? This is what kind of what we'll have. Okay. So if username doesn't exist, we will check to see if the email doesn't exist, and both of these must succeed correctly for us to make the user. Okay? If the username does already exist, we'll throw an error to get out of the chain. If we're in the second link in the chain, if the email does exist, we'll throw another error to get out of the chain. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll return an SQL statement that builds or creates a new user. So we'll do db.execute insert into users, and then we'll do a pair of parentheses. The columns we're going to add, then values, then another pair of parentheses. Okay, this is kind of what the thing is going to be. So the columns that are required for the ones I did in the earlier video is username, email, password, and create. Okay, so it's going to be 3 question marks, and then the now function, which is going to be used for the timestamp. Okay, so username, email, password, create. Now, be very careful. Do not name your column create because that's a reserved word in SQL, and SQL will. Okay. Very unfortunate, but it happens. Okay? And we'll return this. Okay, so we're going to return this promise. So if this succeeds, I should have a new user. We'll come down here. We'll do dot then. Same results, right? Fields, nice little fat arrow function. And then we'll need to test to see if this actually succeeds. If it does, what's going to happen is we do if results and results dot affected rows, which will be 1, right? So if we add a new row, the affected rows will be 1. 1 is seen as true. So if we have result and the result has a property affected row equals 1, this is now true. Okay, then we'll do succeed print user has been created. And then what we'll do here is we'll do response dot redirect slash login. Okay. And this is all we'll go for this video in terms of the logic. Okay, so more. So this is kind of the chain, right? And then if you wanted to, you can do some error prints here. Username already exists, so we can see it. Email already exists, so we can see it. And for some reason the row isn't created, but we haven't been able to catch, at least it doesn't throw an error that we can catch with a asynchronous throw statement. We'll do the throw, we'll do the error print. DB error user was not created. This one's a little special because this is going to be the SQL statement failing. So we're not going to actually use a response code. So let's say server error. We'll use a response code, but it won't be 200. Server error user could not be created. Okay. Then the redirect URL will be register. Status code that will be 500. Okay. So this is kind of our chained events where we're going to receive our form data. Whoops, I don't even pass in the password to the. I'll need to add that in a second. Sorry. But anyways, we grab our form data from our request body object. We see if the username exists. If it does not, we will go to see if the email exists. If the email doesn't exist, we will create a new user. If we actually create a user, we'll redirect to login. If we can't, we'll throw a DB error to get out of the promise chain. The reason why I'm throwing these errors is because we need to make sure that the promise is rejected. If you just return or do response dot, redirect register, what's going to happen is this promise chain is going to finish, and then this is going to throw a undefined type error. So we need to break the promise chain by throwing new errors. Okay? This syntax is probably a little cleaner with async and await, but we're going to work the promises for this. Okay, so I need to actually add in the data for the create. So username, email, and password. Right? Those are the 3 values we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to format this, and it's going to actually change a lot. Actually, not too bad. It's not bad. Perfect. Stay here. Okay. It did change this error statement. Okay. So the only thing I'm missing now is my catch block. So we'll do dot catch. This will handle any errors that we get. Then what I'm going to do here now is call next error, like I did in the other videos. However, I have another error that I can handle that's a little more specific, and I want to do something special for it. So what I can do now is if error instance of user error, which means one of these errors are thrown, not just an error from somewhere else, I'm actually going to respond with a redirect stuff like that. So we'll do error print. Error dot get message. Now I remember why I don't have these error prints in here. Because I do it down there. Right? There's no point in doing them twice. Okay. So we're going to you. So we'll print the message, right? Then we'll do response dot status equals error dot get status. So this allows us to write very generic code for this step. That way we don't have to write one for each new error thrown, which is unfortunate. So error dot get redirect URL. Okay. So this is kind of how our registration is going to work, right? And I will clean this up in a few videos to make it look a little cleaner. But for now, this is all we have. Okay? It's not too bad. Okay? One of the bigger issues with this is the router contains too much information. It has database logic. It has controller logic, like business logic. It doesn't need to be in there. The biggest issue is if I change databases, all this gets affected. And later I'll show you a way to write this where if we change databases, as long as we adhere to the same kind of API contract, we don't need to change this router. Okay. So let's see if all this works or does it fail in its wonderful glory as it runs. Okay, so I'm going to remove the comments for now. Okay, so save it. We'll format it, make it look all pretty. We'll rebuild it, see if no complains. No doesn't complain, so that's good. So we'll go back to register, submit, and I get oops, internal server error, data received. Result is not defined on line 21. Control click. Result. Oh, because I put results and results. Typos, 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 typos. So let's retry this. And hopefully these should be created. So we'll re-click this. You notice my app actually redirects to an error page that just does this. Nothing's fancy. Okay, we'll rerun this. We'll try this again. We'll refresh. And then get back to register. What happened? Username already exists. That's unfortunate. But actually, it's actually kind of unfortunate because I get to see my error message that's being printed. I get to see my error print that's going here. This is all done by my catch block. So let's choose a username that doesn't exist. So let's go to Workbench and see what names I have in here so I don't do this again. Shows you how much imagination I lack when doing this. So we'll come to Workbench. What if I open our database? I did T3 or T. Did I do T3? I don't remember. I don't remember the value I did. So let's see. Old T maybe. Old T at mail.com. 1, 2. We use the same password, right? Oops. Result. Fine. Did I hit Control Z somewhere? Oh, it's using the wrong. Oh, this is unfortunate. 128. Copy and paste is not my friend, I tell you that. Do not copy and paste. All right, so let's try this again. I do not recommend copying and pasting. There we go. User has been created. Everything worked just fine. And we go to our database. We'll refresh this. And you can see old T, our password, our email, and our username. User type inactive we ignored because I have a default set to 0. And then when we created it. So we can see all the kind of things we have. Okay. So this is kind of how you guys can set up registration. I showed you the forum setup. Then I also showed you the backend logic as well. Then like I said, later videos we'll clean this up to make it look better. So in the next video, I'm going to do login, right? Because it already spent half an hour just doing registration. Okay. So you can see the ship is small if I didn't do a bunch of typos. In any case, this is how you guys can do registration. You guys want to use this code to give you guys kind of an idea of how to set this up. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the next video.